Welcome to the Narrowgate Podcast. I'm Weston.
And I'm Logan.
And this is the Mike Zinser episode.
Mike
has been coming out to Narrowgate for a long time, since 2009, with the Tennessee Association of Woodturners, and he teaches the guys how to use the wood lathes to make all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah, and just a sweet guy.
Really sweet, yeah.
Really sweet, and is in a really cool season of life where, like, dude, he's just loving on this ministry and these guys well. And yeah.
I thought it was really meaningful how much Narrowgate has become part of his life.
Yeah.
You know, and to hear him talk about Narrowgate and just the impact that it's had on him, right? As he's impacting the lives of all these young men is a really, really cool thing.
That happens. That happens to people. You get close and we pull you in. So as always, come here. Come in close. If you want to hear more about Narrowgate, you can check out the show notes. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Mike, thank you so much for being here with us. Welcome to the Narrowgate Podcast.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. You can answer them however you want to.
Okay.
All right, who are you and why are you here?
My name is Mike Zinser. And the simple answer is I'm here because of Phil Stoner. But it's a lot more than that. I came here early in 2009 when we started to build out a wood shop. But I had been to Phil's house the Christmas before, and we made some Christmas gifts for some of the students, for their parents, I think. Anyway, I've grown accustomed to this place since
2009. That's way back.
Yeah,
way back when.
It's a group of us with the Tennessee Association of Woodturners have been out for all these years doing a little hands-on class in wood turning, and I think it's good for the young men to work with their hands.
Absolutely.
I think it's good for old guys like us to get out and be among them. And if you want to learn to do something, teach it.
Yeah, it is definitely a benefit to the students. I mean, I was here in 2011 as a student, and you guys had just kind of started coming out on a regular basis and teaching wood turning classes. And I remember 2011 is about the time that Boots had started learning wood turning, and he was starting to kind of get a knack for it. And so he helped teach the classes.
He did.
And I remember this very vividly. We were turning. He was helping me turn, and by helping me, I mean he was doing it. And I was watching him.
Yeah. How many hands can be on a lathe at one time? Is the question I would ask.
I can tell you 4 can.
Okay.
Yeah.
4. Well, he would tell me, okay, move your spindle gouge this way, and I'd be like, okay. So I try. He's like, no, let me just show you. And then he'd grab it and he'd start to do it. And then after a couple hours, then I had this ice cream scoop handle, and he was like, man, this looks great. And I was like, well, I'm glad you think so. You made it.
Well, I love that in this interview I get to play. If there's any audience who are listening who know nothing about wood turning, I get to be the advocate for them. I was a student in 2007, so I really kind of spent some time away, and then even on staff, I didn't spend much time. I spent a little time in the leather shop. I learned some leather working skills, but I have never turned wood here, so I get to ask all the fun questions like, what is a spindle gauge? Can you tell me what that is? Am I saying that right?
Spindle gouge.
Spindle gouge.
Right?
See, this is
going
going well already.
Spindle gouge.
I get to ask the general question like,
Logan was
what
a part
is
of
wood turning?
Logan was a part of the program where it was just weed eating.
And hiking.
Yeah.
And really,
hiking,
really bad hiking
really
stories.
bad experiences hiking.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, so I was here when we did wood turning, and I haven't wood turned since. Not because of the class or that it wasn't interesting. I actually would love to pick it back up again, but specifically because I was turning a bowl, one of the natural edge bowls that y'all teach. And I mean, I had spent hours on it, like 4 or 5 hours just standing there carving this bowl. And it was awesome. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever made. And right as I'm like kind of finishing up with my last turn, I had my chisel angled the wrong direction or something, and it just caught that bowl and the whole thing exploded. And I was just so mad. I like threw my chisel down. I was like, oh, I'm going to the metal shop, and I never looked back, man. You can't mess metal up. You just stick it back in the forge and heat it back up. And I just remember being so frustrated that I spent all that time making something cool, and then it was nothing.
Well, when you blow them up that bad, there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
But most of the time when you make a mistake, we just call those design opportunities.
There you go.
Okay.
A little bit of
cool.
personal touch.
So if I get this right, around 2009, and I'll just say this to introduce myself to you further. So Phil Stoner is my wife's uncle.
Okay.
So I love Phil, and I absolutely love the Stoners.
And for anybody who doesn't know Phil, he's on the board of directors for Narrowgate. He's the father of one of the first students at Narrowgate.
Yep,
and,
been a part of this thing from the beginning.
Yep.
So let me ask this, Colin. Do I have this correct? That like around 2009, when you guys started like teaching those wood turning classes, was that really the first foray of Narrowgate into artisan craftsmanship type stuff? Was that really the beginning?
Yeah, because the 2008 Christmas, it was when I was a student. Or no, 2007 Christmas was when I was a student. And you came over to Phil's, and we all went over there and we made the crosses. And,
right.
Yep. And so that's kind of when everything started, was 2007,
Wow.
2008. And then 2009 was when we really started kicking up the wood shops here.
Actually, in 2009, we had a member of the Tennessee Association of Wood Turners that had a terminal illness. And he got a group of us to come out and inventory his shop because he was going to sell it. And then he tried to donate it. After we had done that, he tried to donate it to our wood club.
Okay.
And we had no real use for it. We were just in, barred facilities and so forth. And so Jeff Brockett was in contact with him, and I suggested when he tried to give it to us, why don't you present Narrowgate to Tom? It's a guy named Tom Yount. And why don't you present Narrowgate to them? And so Tom and his wife Jane came out, liked what they saw, and they were the initial gifters of a wood shop his was worth about $40,000. But there was a lot of stuff we couldn't use. He had one lathe. We needed more than that. So in 2009, we built the little donkey barn into a wood shop with Tom's equipment. And then we fundraised and got 6 little mini lathes and a bunch of turning tools borrowed or gifted. And we started turning.
It's amazing. I remember.
I just want to state before you go there. I just want to state the obvious. Like, how cool is it that from that one story, all the way back then, how just teaching craftsmanship and working with wood, how it's grown in 10, 15 years to where it is now, and how it's a weekly, if not daily, part of the culture here.
Oh yeah,
I'm just impressed, man. I wonder if you feel the weight of that or a certain responsibility of that. I mean, again, I think it's just partnering with God and what He wanted to do here. But I just want to say thank you for what it's worth for being the one to kind of partner with the Lord and kick that off. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I really enjoy coming to Narrowgate. It's I always think the kids get, the young men. I always call them kids. When you're my age, they're kids. That makes total sense. And so anyway, I always thought they got something out of it because I don't see young guys having the opportunity of wood shop like we used to have in high school. I had freshman year of high school, I had wood shop.
Yeah.
I made a gun rack and I took it home. My dad tore it apart and rebuilt it. So I was terrible, but I've always enjoyed working with my hands. And I saw that as when Bill and Phil kind of said, this is kind of what we want to do. I think I just kind of took it on myself to be responsible for it.
Yeah. So I remember wheeling those little mini lathes in every time we wanted to do a class. We didn't have a whole lot of space in the wood shop, but we'd wheel them in and have classes, and then we'd wheel them out so we could work on other projects during the week. And now we've got a 10,000 square foot wood shop and a turning studio where the lathes get to stay, and that just the evolution of that over time is crazy. And you're right. I mean, craftsmanship is a kind of a major element in who Narrowgate is, and to see kind of the birthplace of that, and you being, at the center of that is really cool.
Well, it really is just a cool vehicle to teach the power of the gospel and just the pictures that it represents. I mean, go watch all the videos on YouTube that Narrowgate has already said those things way better than I can.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, taking that gun rack home to your dad and him rebuilding it. Do you think like working with your hands and working with wood, is that something you learned from him? Is that?
I think I actually learned because I was interested, and I learned just by doing. I wasn't really a turner for a long time. I probably have had a lathe for 50 years, but I built furniture, not for sale, just for fun.
Sure.
But I built furniture for the house, and I used to make a lot of little clocks, and they needed turnings on them. So I bought a lathe, and I scraped my way and sandpapered my way to getting the parts that I needed. But then, I've built tall post beds for my daughters. I built cherry desks for them. I built a lot of furniture. But then in about 2001, when I retired, I had been in the Tennessee Association of Woodturners since the early 90s, and I wasn't really a turner. I was just a member of a club that, in fact, during those years, I was president on and off for 6 years, and I wasn't even a turner. But after that, I took some classes and figured out how to turn. And then I've learned a whole lot more just coming out here and teaching.
So there's a relationship between sort of the mindset and the approach to life that a craftsman has that I think is beneficial to these young men that are learning how to think, learning how to approach life differently. That I think is a really cool concept, right? Like a craftsman mentality says, okay, I want to do this excellently. I want to produce something that is beautiful, that is not just throw it together. I want to refine it. I want to make it beautiful. I want to, pay attention to the details. And I think that when you're a craftsman, that's not just your approach to projects and, like wood turning, but like your approach to life. And so how I'm curious, how would you say that being a craftsman has shaped sort of the reality of your life?
Not exactly sure how to. My wife would say that she just sends me down to the dungeon to build things. I just found when I worked that in my profession, I was a salesman for a company, and I just say times were stressful, and at times you just needed a break, and the break was in the evenings when I could go down, release the stress, and do whatever. I don't know why. I like the feeling of the accomplishment of the end result. And right now, as I've gotten older, I can't really build big furniture.
Sure.
Well, I built my granddaughter a table a while ago, but I don't do that anymore. But I can go to my workshop and I can do something on the lathe that would take me 2 hours and have a finished piece. But if I build a piece of furniture, that takes me weeks. And sometimes if I procrastinate like I do, it may take me months.
Yeah.
But it's kind of my stress relief. It just allows me to get away, be myself. And I've said this before, but I think I've been woodworking for more than 60 years, and I've still got 10 fingers.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll celebrate that.
Yeah.
I can't say that I would be that successful. In response to your question, I was thinking about, man, what's the value, like as a student of going through a student experience at Narrowgate and like discovering like, oh yeah, like I can produce things with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can do this. I can be a craftsman. It really hits at this hidden dividing line in our culture of like, am I going to be a consumer or am I going to be a producer?
Yeah.
Because really, I think that kind of expands into a lot of different parts of our life. Like even with our faith, it's like, am I just going to be a consumer of this? Am I just going to receive? Am I just going to go to church and consume it? Or am I going to allow the Lord to produce some fruit? Like, am I going to be an active participant in my faith? Am I going to be an active participant in life? Am I going to, whatever your giftings are, it might not even be with woodworking or metalworking, but like, I try to think about that with music. Am I just consuming what's being poured at me, or am I allowing the Spirit of God to like move in and through my giftings and produce something? It's such a valuable thing to hand to a guy. And say, you can take an active role in your life. Like,
and it taps into something like something deeper. I feel like with God being the creator of all things and man being made in his image, we were also made in that image of that innate ability to create, we were made to create too, not obviously in the same way as God, create from nothing, but like he's given us the ability to relate to him in that way, that we can make things with our hands or, create songs or musical compositions and things. And I think that taps into something in our souls that we can relate to God in sort of a deeper way. And that for me, whenever I've made something with my hands or I've worked on something or I've made something, it sort of brings up this confidence, that I may or may not have had previously, that's like, oh, I can actually make something valuable. I have something to offer, like I didn't know that I could do this, and I can actually, and I think that brings about some, almost new revelation for some of the guys that come through here. They're it's a confidence booster,
I think it's part of the reason why I keep coming back and keep coming back, because I see the young men who really they're not confident when they first start. I know the last class, one of the guys said, it was the sixth and final class. We did a Greenwood Bowl. He said, this was the best class ever. So well,
it's interesting, in what I can imagine, working with wood, but specifically turning, like you can see their confidence level, probably as they're doing it.
Absolutely,
it looks and sounds and feels completely different. So you get to watch that process. Like you can qualify it as it's happening.
It's interesting. Most like it. There are a few that have not really. They've gone through the program, but I could tell they were there because they were there. But most of the young guys that go through really see the accomplishment of doing something. I think the first biggie is when they do the chalice. I think that's the hardest project of the group. And I think that's one that in the platter in the Greenwood Bowl are the sessions that I think create the most. Hey, I can really do this.
Yeah. Can you describe like what that class and what those finished products are like for some of our?
Well, we do a communion set. The communion set is a chalice and a platter, and normally we try to get a good wood. So we're trying to get cherry or walnut. I think most of them turn them and gift them to their parents. But then the Greenwood Bowl is just it's a bowl. It's pretty simple. But for a long time, when I taught, I was teaching more just the concept. It didn't have to get to a finished product. But now, as time has gone on, we certainly want the chalice and the platter to be finished. But the Greenwood Bowl was, we turn a bowl, big deal.
And then it
But
explodes.
now we're carrying it all the way to the point that even though it normally would not think you could get a finish on it, get it look, they're turning out great looking
and
stuff.
Just so you know, I have officiated a lot of graduates' weddings, and they've used their communion platters that they made with you in their wedding for, to participate in communion. And it's beautiful, man. And they're proud of it.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll say
that makes me really feel good.
Oh, man.
I've never done any of the turning classes, but when my wife and I got married, we were gifted a communion set, a chalice and a platter that were made here on this property.
I used mine in my wedding.
Yeah, and we took communion in our wedding, and Bill and Stacy led that portion of it. And man, to this day, that chalice and that platter, they sit in like a place of prominence in our home. It's an heirloom on display at all times. So
yeah. So yeah, the work that you're doing is really meaningful because it's not just inspiring confidence in the moment, but it's also building something into their lives that lasts, because they're able to look back on that. I mean, that's something that they made that they're able to incorporate in something as significant as a wedding ceremony, like their own wedding ceremony. That's just, it's just meaningful, That's really, really cool.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, like you mentioned, really kind of starting this venture with Narrowgate after retirement. What's and you've already talked about the value of coming out here, but I'm wondering if there's any specific stories that come to mind about like, man, you're at this season of life and like God is using you to pour into others, and we all in a lot of different ways are reaping the benefit from that. So I just what's that like to you in this season of life? Like what are the things God's talking to you about or revealing in you or through you or to you or yeah, I don't know what's a general question about like, man, what do you really love about coming out here so much?
Well, at first I thought I was coming out here simply because I was teaching wood turning. And then it didn't take me long to figure out that that's only a minor part of why we come out. I think it's just so important. I call the young guys troubled, whether they are or not, and I know they're not all that way, but I think that it's important that guys my age or, older guys come out here and spend time. You could teach wood turning out here. Anybody, Boots could teach it. I don't think that's what it's all about.
It's that easy that Boots can teach it?
Well,
so easy, Boots could teach it.
Well, he couldn't have when we first started.
That's right.
But he Boots has practiced some.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And he's taught several classes out here.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah.
Going backwards a little bit, one of the things that we found out early is I would teach a class, Phil would teach a class, somebody else would teach a class, somebody else. And there are millions of ways to teach wood turning. And all we were doing was confusing. So back in like 2012 or 2013, I don't remember when, I asked Boots if I could just teach all the classes. And he said, oh God, I was wondering how I could ask you to do that. Anyway, it worked out. And I learned from teaching the classes, but I get a real satisfaction of seeing the creativity come out of some of them. Some of them you almost can't hold down. You say, this is why I'd like you to do it. And they're making all this fancy stuff. And I kind of like that too. And so I know there have been a lot of young men that have gone through the program, but there are probably 5 or 10 that I remember that just, I think it just turned on their creative juices.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure there are more, but there are some that just, it was so easy to see the things that they were doing.
There's been several guys that I remember after you taught a pen class, they would go to Woodcraft after they graduated, buy bunches of pen kits and just turn pens. Like there was one guy that turned like 100 pens or something just because he just loved it,
Goodness, we've interviewed sometime last month, we interviewed Mackenzie Meredith, who I don't know if you remember him.
I know who he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and talk about a guy who admittedly, I mean, showed up depressed. I mean, just ready to give up on life. And I think he's a great example. And I think he would agree of somebody who probably worked with wood for the first time, 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there in one of your classes. And I mean, like, talk about a guy who now has confidence in the Lord and confidence in himself. And he's hand making his daughter's, or already has handmade his daughter's crib. I'm like, what a beautiful picture of somebody who like had no hope, found Jesus, learned to gain confidence in themselves and their abilities, and now they're using it to serve and love their family. I mean, that's just such a beautiful picture, man. I love that.
I remember it's been a good many years ago. There was y'all had some kind of function in Franklin, and it was like a lunch. And at that luncheon, they said something about, like, at that point, 250 students had gone through. Most had taken the wood turning thing at that point. And it was really, it was thrilling to me to hear that about 60 of them were actually working in some kind of wood career. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's because of the wood turning group that's been out here.
And you guys didn't stop doing it. And now we're over 500, so that statistic just keeps growing,
Yeah, it's not to get too in the clouds here for a minute, but it's crazy to think, like, we don't ever really know the fruit, like the future products, like what's coming down the line, that all started with a simple decision, of being obedient to the Lord in one moment.
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't even feel the weight of like, oh yeah, I need to obey the Lord in this, but it's like partnering with Phil and partnering with Bill and coming out here for the first time and to see the impact that's made down the road.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. So I wonder if to get to know about, your kind of early life, maybe a little bit more, were there any impactful moments in your early life that have kind of led you to where you are today?
Probably some that weren't good.
Sure. Hey, we like those too. We have those kind of conversations all the time.
So I went to a private high school my freshman year, and I it was a school where you went to your own pace, and my pace was not very good, and so I actually was not invited back the next year. And then it took, I don't think I was ever dumb, but I was not very academic. So then it took me another 4 years to get through high school. So I spent 5 years in high school. And by the time I finished high school, we were about to go into we were starting into the Vietnam War, and my dad was dead set against it. So I went to college, and that gave you a deferment, and I buckled down. So I got out of college in 4 years instead of 5 that it took for high school. I got married in my senior year of college, and I've actually had a really blessed life. I think that that part of that has been my family, being married over 60 years. But a big part of that since 2010 has really been Narrowgate also. I mean, it's God and family and Narrowgate are about my top 3.
Wow.
And I didn't want to give up the teaching part last year, but I knew I had to. And it took me a year or two to find I knew who the right person was. I just had to get him to commit. I had to get him to decommit to some other things so he could commit out here.
Yeah, that's the way it happens.
But anyway,
sometimes.
I still come out as a assistant. If that's a, and then one of the things that I've really learned, we talked a little bit before this started about I grew up a Presbyterian. I became a Catholic because I married a Catholic and my kids were Catholic. One of the things that I've found by coming out here is I thought I knew a little bit about my religion, and now I find I have more questions than I have answers because I've come out here. But it's made me look deeper into my religion. I wouldn't say I was ever a really good Presbyterian. I wouldn't say I was a really good Catholic. I would just say that I believe that God controls my life, guides my life, takes me where I'm going, and eventually, I hope takes me home.
So what is it in like maybe a practical example or two about coming out here that made you realize those things about your faith?
Listening. I mean, I've been out here when classes are going on by the fireplace. I've listened to some of that. I've just to make a kind of a long story short, in 2019, I had a bad health year. So I was not out here at all, but Boots came to my house regularly. And I think I learned more about my faith from him that year and the books he had me read that I have just found that this is just too big and too much of an important part of my life that I wouldn't want to give it up.
That's cool. And so, I mean, Boots is how much younger than you?
Well,
5 or 6 years.
I think he's 40-ish, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, I think that's...
I'm twice that old.
I think there's something special there that you mentioned earlier, that it's good for the older guys to come out here and kind of pour their life out into the lives of the students that are here, the younger men. But then what you just referred to, the kids. What you just referred to is that you were willing to learn and receive something from someone younger than you.
Oh, absolutely.
That to me is something really cool. There's sometimes there's guys who are sort of walled up against learning from anyone younger.
Well, it wasn't just Boots; it was Daniel also. So these are special people in my life.
Yeah.
No, but it's funny when you think about it. It's that's not something that probably happens in a whole lot of circles.
Yeah.
Outside the ones that Jesus provides.
Yeah.
The ability to kind of cross generational lines and learn from one another.
I personally, I think I always want to learn something new. I don't care who it comes from, who teaches me.
Yeah.
And at this point in life, virtually everybody I talk to is going to be younger. So
that's a great perspective on that.
So what? Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I guess the older you get, the more limited your options become. If that's your perspective.
Is no one going to ask him about his bracelets?
I was just thinking about it. You've got some colorful, colorful things going on there.
We call that flair? Do we call that flair?
Well, I've got 3 granddaughters, and we've always gone to the beach in June. I rent a house, and they're kind enough to come down and spend a week with us. And so I guess the first or second year, they were probably 4 or 5 years old, and they decided they were going to buy Papa a bracelet, each one of them. So I've got 3. So I had started with 3 of these things, and they haven't added on too many. I've added on the rest. But I've forgotten how many they are. They've been there a long time. Some of them just rot off my arm.
Yeah.
But I just never have taken them off.
That's
I like
cool.
them.
That's cool.
So,
well, they look awesome. Yeah, they really pull the whole vibe together.
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, man, in over 60 years of marriage, you got any marriage advice you want to toss at some younger guys?
I'll soak that up.
Yeah. Why does that become a recurring segment on our episode?
I think, yeah.
We're not a marriage and family podcast, but we are. We have
interested in
wives
being
and
better
young
at
children.
family.
Yeah.
You really want my opinion on this, huh?
Come on.
Well,
I think people marry too late now. Too late in life. It's nice to have some worldly experiences and so forth, but I think too many people decide that it's not important enough to have a commitment early. I was 22 when I married. My wife was 20. I mean, I look at the youngsters out here, young guys out here. All of them are older than we were, and so. But I think we grew up together. I mean, we started dating when I was 17. She was 15, and I just think that people get too. I have thought for a long time. It's just getting married in your 30s and 40s is 30s is just. I think it's difficult. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. But
sure, no, I mean, I can see that.
I think it's difficult.
No, I've often thought of that though. I mean, again, I didn't have a great head on my shoulders in my early 20s, and of course, I'm thankful for how my life has played out. But when I think about my 20s, I was living my life for myself, and the idea of being in that kind of committed partnership with somebody you're in love with, and like you're not living your life just for yourself, and that changes everything.
Yeah, I think part of that, though, is I came up in a different world than you came up in. I came up in the 40s and the 50s. You came up in the 70s and 80s, maybe? I don't know how old you are.
90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
90s.
And the world has changed dramatically. And so my life was simple. First TV I ever saw was a neighbor across the street pulled one out in his front yard, and we all watched television at night. First air conditioner we had was in the house was a window unit in 1950 when we moved to Alabama. We moved there from Ohio. It was cool in Ohio, but it was hot in Alabama.
What part of Alabama?
Birmingham. Yeah, I grew up in Birmingham.
Yeah, my mom's family's from Birmingham, Montgomery. Kind of both, yeah.
Yeah, we've been all over the North. My dad's company was doing stuff for World War II, and we had moved about 6 or 7 times before I moved to Birmingham when I was 9.
Well, Mike, I am grateful for you. I think that your presence here has impacted the lives of so many people and continues to do so.
Probably more people than we can really think about.
Oh, yeah. And that's
humbling.
Well, man, it's earned too. You deserve that much, at least a public appreciation, affirmation, just of the man that you are and the heart that you have for the young men, and just being willing to pour out your life and your time and your energy and your all of it, man. It's a real blessing. It's a gift.
Well, it's been a gift to me. It's been a true gift to me. So it's been a two-way street. I'm
gonna steal your last question, if that's all right.
It's not my question. It's our question.
It's our question. Thank you for including me in that. This podcast goes out to a lot of different people, but primarily our audience is Narrowgate graduates and people who have been close to the Narrowgate program. Is there anything that you would say to Narrowgate graduates as sort of a kind of a final word of encouragement or challenge or something that you would like to say to them kind of from your heart? If you could think of one thing to say, what would it be?
Well, I guess I'd say to remember your narrow gate experience. Remember all the things that you picked up while you were here. Remember why you came and what you were when you got here. Remember who you are when you left, because I've seen so many just absolute transformations of young men. So I know that the program here has been, it's been such a blessing to over 500 people now. And just don't, if you had a bad time before, put those in your past. Remember what's the good things that have happened since you've gone through and left Narrow Gate.
Oh.
Been found a spouse, have a family. Remember all the good things that brings to you.
Yeah.
Because God can always turn it around. Yeah, I'm not proud of that.
It's a wood turning pun.
It's a wood turning pun.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, Mike, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We really
Thank
appreciate it, man.